11. I'm retired pastor here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible class, and we are studying chapter 24 in the book of Deuteronomy. But before we get into that, we did the first 4 verses last week on divorce, and that pretty well took up the whole time. But I was, in retrospect, I started thinking about some of the things, and there are a couple of issues that I'd just like to touch on with regard to the church and divorce. Different churches have different traditions on this issue. And the United Methodist Church is, I think, a lot more tolerant of marriage, remarriage, understanding the situations that people find themselves in, and that the church is there to help pick up the pieces after a breakup. I really think that's part of our role. And as a pastor, if I have a few conditions on it, but I don't want to do a marriage where somebody divorced his wife and just wants to marry his honey. I got a problem with that. But one of the stricter denominations is the Roman Catholic Church, and they have an understanding of sacrament which is somewhat different. Our understanding of sacrament on the Lord's Supper and on baptism are the same. Actually, we come out of the same tradition, and so we understand baptism and the Lord's Supper the same way that Roman Catholicism does, except that we're much more open about who we offer it to. But when it comes to divorce and remarriage, it just seems like the Roman Catholic Church takes a stand that is, to my mind, a bit unreasonable, because they understand marriage as a sacrament. They don't understand, they have a whole range of sacraments that we do not recognize. We only recognize the 2. But in the Roman Catholic tradition, marriage is a sacrament not to be violated, and I understand that. And if a person is divorced and remarried, the doctrine is that communion will not be offered to them. Now, if that's the case, in the understanding of the Roman Catholic Church, if you are excommunicant so that the church cannot endorse your salvation, then you don't get any. Salvation. Okay? Now, but on the other hand, Holy Communion is a sacrament. Baptism is a sacrament. If you're old enough, you make a statement to the church. This is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to do. And if you violate those vows, you can go to confession, and you can be exonerated. Okay, but I don't know why there's no exoneration for a divorce and remarriage, especially when the circumstances warrant a divorce, and where the Bible clearly states that a person can remarry after they've gotten a bill of divorce. So I'm not understanding how there is no grace given to people who are trying to put their lives back together, who can find some salvation in someone who actually loves them, as opposed to the person who didn't. Especially when you have cultures where the choice about who to marry is not given to the bride or groom. You're kind of forced into these relationships, and so I take issue. That's just me, okay? But I take issue with that point of view. I think that God is very used to human beings breaking vows all the time. Anybody in the room? No, I'm funny. But I'm just saying, it's like he who's without sin, let him cast the first stone. It just seems like they're throwing stones. That's just my response to it.
A Catholic priest won't do a marriage for a person who's divorced either.
That's correct. You have to have your marriage annulled. And we know people who are kind of extended family that have been married for years and just got their first marriages annulled, and they went back and remarried in the church. So, along those lines, I want to promote something too, just let you know. When we do a marriage as clergy in this state and in other states, we have a legal document that we sign for the state. And it's registered with the registered deeds in the county, and it's a marriage license, okay? That is the civil portion of the marriage. And if you divorce, that's the portion that's going to cost you a lot to take care of, okay? But there is also the church wedding. And the church wedding and the civil wedding are two separate entities altogether. And it is not illegal for the church to perform a wedding without the civil part. That can happen. And what that does is it, the state doesn't recognize your marriage, but the church does. Now, I don't recommend it, okay? I think everything needs to be copacetic on both sides, I really do. And if I feel like I couldn't do a marriage because it would be otherwise illegal, I don't know that I certainly wouldn't perform it. But I know colleagues that have. And the situation is that sometimes the state puts people in financial jeopardy if they remarry. And that's why they would go with a church wedding without the state document. But I'm just saying, it does happen. It depends on the pastor that you go to. And I would be careful about that.
My cousin's son was dating a girl who had a cancer in her brainstem. And they gave her like 6 or 8 months to live. Well, they wanted to get married.
Right.
But if they got married legally, then he would assume all of that debt from Duke, which she had to go to Duke every week.
Right.
She was going to Duke. So they wanted to be married. So she shopped around, I guess. The only place in New Bern that she could find that would marry him was the Episcopal Church in downtown New Bern.
Yeah.
And they had this big, elaborate, all-out wedding at the Episcopal Church. But they were not married.
In the eyes of the state.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was 30 years ago, and she's still alive.
How about that? So he really didn't know what he was getting into, did he? Watch out for that death do us part, 'cause that could catch you.
Did they go back to the state and get a marriage license and get it legal? No, they never had.
No.
They just,
No. But in the eyes of the church, in the eyes of God, the marriage is valid.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he said. He said that, I don't care whether the state likes it or not, as long as
Right.
God knows that, in our hearts.
Now, the kicker is that the state can come back on you for common law in some circumstances, I think.
We don't have common law.
We don't have common law here. Some states do, but we don't here.
But if you're trying to get Social Security benefits or some type of welfare benefits, sometimes they'll look to see who you're living with, you've been there a long time, and they'll say we have to use that person's income and determine what you're going to get yourself, or if you even qualify.
Right. So it can get complicated.
Yeah.
So
They can get
I guess if you were filing taxes, for example,
Yeah.
you couldn't do
Couldn't
it.
file jointly. Could not file jointly. So, anyway, interesting tidbits, okay?
But what if somebody got married in the church but didn't have the civil ceremony? What if they want to get divorced later on?
Then just say, get out 3 times.
Walk away.
I'm gonna try to.
Okay. Here's one that, I didn't dodge this bullet. When a man is newly married, this is on verse 5, he shall not go out with the army or be charged with any related duty. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife whom he has married.
You failed that one.
I failed that one, boy, I'll tell you. They nailed me. I guess it was more than a year.
Yeah.
It was, but,
But up until that point, people can get deferments if they were married and had a child.
right. And then they went to the lottery and my number was up. So, yeah. Had to make some life-changing decisions at that point. But it was okay. I made $110 a month.
You were rolling with that.
Good.
Where'd you get all that money?
Yeah. We have somebody in the church who has been in service for a while, and he finally made E5. But when he started out, I said, "Now listen, you're not authorized to wife until you're E5." So they make it kind of difficult on those junior enlisted people, believe me. And I am so glad, by the way, that the junior enlisted are getting a substantial raise in this next year. And I'm so glad to see it. Junior enlisted people up to I don't know, E5, I guess something. But they've been so underpaid, it's been terrible. Some of them have gone on food stamps, you know, just to make it. And that's wrong. That's just wrong.
That's wrong.
Okay. This one is interesting. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for that would be taking a wife in pledge. Okay, what do you use a millstone for? Grinding your grain, okay? When the Nazis invaded Poland, they would go to the homes of Polish people and they would confiscate their mills, their grinding mills, because the objective was to starve the Polish population. So you couldn't take a millstone because you've taken the food out of people's mouths. They can't make bread. And so you don't take a millstone in pledge, okay? But that's really how cruel they were. People don't understand that the Nazis didn't go into countries to fight armies. They went in to annihilate populations. And what they were doing to the minority groups that they were initially targeting, they intended for the whole population of Poland and every conquered territory they went into. Eventually they wanted to kill everybody. So they would confiscate the millstones. If someone is caught kidnapping another Israelite, enslaving or selling the Israelite, then that kidnapper shall die. So you shall purge the evil in your midst. Okay, they don't specify whether this somebody is Jewish or Gentile. If somebody steals somebody else, then they're liable to death. Now, that meant that Joseph's brothers should have been under a death sentence for what they did to Joseph.
So my translation says fellow Israelite.
Fellow Israelite, okay. Okay, well, someone, all right, in this translation. But it's kind of interesting. Why would they specify a fellow Israelite? I mean, you would want to kill anybody that did that, you know? And that you know, to us it makes perfect sense. Okay? That's human trafficking. Look how many people have been stolen in the last 4 years. How many people have been stolen? Children, women, how many of them have been stolen in the last 4 years in this country? It's a travesty. I mean, we should be looked upon by the rest of the world the way Western Europe looked at us when we were still doing slavery and England had outlawed it. They really look down on us. You know, one of the primary reasons why England did not finally come in overtly on the side of the Confederacy is that it was a slave union, and they just after the Emancipation Proclamation, there was no way the British could come in on the side of the Confederacy, even though they supplied them. They were the major suppliers of uniforms and weapons to the Confederacy, but officially they couldn't recognize them because of that. But I think a lot of countries ought to look at us pretty much the same way right now, because we've tolerated this in our country up until now. Okay, if someone, let's say, guard against an outbreak of leprous skin disease by being very careful, you shall carefully observe whatever the Levitical priests instruct you, just as I have commanded them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on your journey out of Egypt. What did the Lord God do to Miriam on the way out of? Come on now, we've gone over this. Yeah, no, she didn't. Well, she did die, yeah, but not from this. Okay, she just.
He struck her with leprosy.
Yes, God struck her with leprosy and also cured her of leprosy. Okay, so it was a punishment. She rebelled against Moses. God struck her with leprosy. And then she was cured of leprosy. Well, we don't know if it was leprosy. Not every skin disease that presents is leprous, okay? And you can imagine there must have been an awful lot of them, considering all the times I go to the dermatologist. I'm surprised I didn't get thrown out. But, you know, so God is saying that this, you know, this may be leprosy and it may be cured. But they're supposed to go to the Levitical priests. What did Jesus tell the lepers when the lepers actually, there were, 7 lepers that came to him? And he told them to do what?
They go wash.
No, it was, what did he tell them after they were healed?
Go to the priest.
Go to the priest.
And only one came back.
Only one came back. You know why? He was a Gentile. He couldn't go to the priest. And he's the only one that came back and thanked him.
He was a Gentile, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think it was 10 lepers, I think. But anyway, I may have the count wrong. I'm like that with math. But anyway, it's interesting that Jesus is following this command after a healing. You know, go check with the Levitical priest. And here's the other thing that you see in here that moves this out of the Exodus itself, okay? They are Levitical priests. If it was during the Exodus, they would have been Aaronic priests. And the Levites would have been the ones who were the workabees under the Aaronic priesthood. But because they are Levitical priests, you know that there's been a transformation here. That the Aaronic priesthood has been displaced by the Levitical priesthood. Okay, when you make your neighbor a loan of any kind, you shall not go into the house to take the pledge. Here's another thing. It says house. It does not say tent. Okay? So you know that when Deuteronomy was written, it was written after people lived in houses. Okay? Again, not Mosaic, but using Mosaic tradition. You shall wait outside while the person to whom you are making the loan brings the pledge out to you. If the person is poor, you shall not sleep in the garment given you as a pledge. You shall give the pledge back by sunset so that your neighbor may sleep in the cloak and bless you, and it will be to your credit before the Lord your God. So if you take something in pledge, I gotta tell you also that in these cultures, and this is the case in the Orient, and it's the case anytime you make you get a loan from a loan shark, that you better pay up fast. Okay, these loans are very, very, very short term, very short term, and so it would not be unusual that a person gets a loan for a day, but it would be for an extended period of time, you know. I think that's kind of an unusual thing. But anyway, you can't take a person's cloak in pledge because they've got to sleep in it. So you're not going to make their life miserable over the loan. Okay? This is one that contradicts some of the things that we've read already in the Pentateuch. Oh, wait a minute. Nope, I'll go back to verse 14. You shall not withhold the wages of poor and needy laborers, whether they're other Israelites or aliens who reside in your land, in one of your towns. You shall pay them their wages daily before sunset, because they are poor and their livelihood depends on them. Otherwise, they might cry to the Lord against you, and you would incur guilt. So, all of you who get a monthly paycheck, it's in violation of this law. You can see that there's an immediacy here, and this, the reason why loans were short term, and the reason why you wanted to pay somebody by the end of the day, is that people were living literally hand to mouth. That was it. How does the Lord's Prayer go?
Give us this day.
Give us this day our daily bread. Okay, not tomorrow's bread, today's. Okay. When you're living in a subsistence culture, which most of the people here are, you live day to day. And if you don't get paid by the end of the day, you don't eat that day. So, and your family doesn't eat. So that's why there's an injunction here. But like I say, everything, we look at, because we are a wealthy country, we can stretch things out. By and large, we can stretch things out. We can get long-term loans. We can, we can wait half a month or a week or whatever, before we get paid. But in those days, everything was subsistence. So, got to be like right now. And if you withhold somebody's wages, then you could put them in real jeopardy just for nutrition. Okay. Parents shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall children be put to death for their parents. Only for their own crimes may persons be put to death. All right. Now, putting to death is one thing, but you can see that sins are passed on for generations within families. People are held to account, or their reputations are held to account for generations for the sin of one person. And parents, not so much parents, but children were held to account for what their parents did.
That's not really fair.
Oh, you think? Okay. But, it's all through the Pentateuch that children would be held accountable for what their parents did for umpteen generations, depending on the sin and depending on the nationality of the parents. Whole communities, tribes, were held to account for things that previous generations did. If you go into the book of Judges, Joshua and Judges, and then you get into in 1st and 2nd Samuel especially, you will find that a lot of the wars that Israel engaged in during that period were wars against other people that they just had a long-term grudge on the way their ancestors treated them during the Exodus. And we're going to be coming to some of that. But, you hold them to account down through the generations. And that's one thing that I think we still do to an extent. You have misgivings about people who've come from cultures that have been bad for us in the past. We have that in, a lot of the racial tensions that we have in this country that still exist are because of old grudges against generations past. Look at the move for reparations. because people were held in slavery. I kind of wish I could get some reparations for what they did to some of my relatives, but overseas, not going to happen. But yeah, the grudges, there are grudges for things that were done generations past that still persist today. And there are, what do you call it, characteristics that people still look for in different races because of what's happened in the past. So, it's not something that we can just say, oh, that was unfair in Deuteronomy. I know I'm being, just because of who I am, a white guy, that I'm being judged by some people, that I automatically have certain attitudes about other people and genders and all the rest, and it's just, stupid. It's stupid. And one of the things that has happened under Christianity, one of the things that is a real blessing under Christianity, is that Christianity is a come-as-you-are party. Okay? You don't come as somebody else. You come as you are. And when we go down and take communion, I'm not getting my communion for my grandfather or great-grandfather. I'm getting communion for myself. And you take a look sometimes, like the Mormons, they'll have baptisms for generations past. We're not held to account we should not be held to account for the way past generations have behaved, but we should be held to account for the way we behave. Okay? In this case, they're just talking about death penalty. They're not talking about reputation. You can still have a bad reputation because of something an ancestor or a child did. We just had a landmark case where there was a kid who went into a school and killed people, and the parents were held liable for providing him the weapon. That's interesting. I think that's something that's going to have to play out through the courts, but I do think that they were grossly careless in doing what they did, and I think that it was a contributing factor. So, but that's something they did. They weren't being held to account for something their child did. They were being held to account for what they did. So that's something that we need to be aware of, because that's something that's now being arbitrated in the courts. You shall not deprive a resident alien or an orphan of justice. You shall not take a widow's garment in pledge. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this. There's always this reference back to when you were a slave, okay? And understand that you were a slave refers to generations ago, okay? But one of the things that I really like about Judaism in the way that they present Passover is that they do it in the first person plural. We were, not my great-great-great-great-grandfather was, we were. And so this understanding of what happened in history is something that we can use for guidance in the present. It's like bringing it forward. This is a because of our history, this is a cultural attitude. Okay? And just like we look back to the Declaration of Independence, this is a cultural attitude that we're still trying to live into. But this is a mindset of the United States that is different and distinct from the mindsets of virtually every other nation on earth. And it's our cultural heritage. So when we say we the people in the Constitution, we're still talking about us. We're not talking about we the people them. We're talking about we the people us when it comes to the Constitution. It is a current event for us. Okay, the Constitution is not old. The Constitution is new with every generation. Okay? And also, you're not going to take advantage of the resident alien or an orphan or widow because they are vulnerable. You're going to be more liberal with them than you would be with somebody who could repay you. So the idea is, if you're going to provide support for a person and they say it's a loan, don't really expect it to be repaid. Understand it as charity primarily, because it's an unsecured loan. Okay? So you're just taking it on faith that this person's going to be able to pay you back, but they probably won't be able to. So just understand they probably won't, but go ahead and take care of them anyway, because you're supposed to take care of these people. Okay. Oh, and they're talking here about a resident alien, not a pass-through alien. Okay, so these people have a green card. Okay, when you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be left for the alien, the orphan, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat your olive trees, do not strip what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. When you gather grapes in your vineyard, do not glean what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, therefore I'm commanding you to do this. So there is a social welfare understanding within the Jewish community from early on. And it is a cultural characteristic that persists to this day. Okay? Jews culturally have been very sensitive to social issues and have promoted them sometimes too much in some cases, in some cultures. But understand where they came from, and a lot of Jews understand where they are, that they are a disadvantaged minority, and they don't want to take advantage of other disadvantaged minorities. They identify with them. And this whole thing is about, you should be, no matter how wealthy you are, you should be identifying with the people who are not. Okay? Well, I think that's going to be about it for today, and thank you very much for being here. God bless you all. See you next week. I will be back.